about the format.
Okay. So my name is Nisha Mathani, and I'm the Director of Tech here at NEU Blockchain. Along with that, I'm also working with a startup on simple NFTs, and if you guys know what that is, and physical asset-based NFTs for real estate. And another thing would be I'm actually doing my master's in smart contracts and cryptocurrency. So yeah, as I said, the agenda would be just to tell you guys about what NEU Blockchain Tech is trying to do, talk to you guys about Web3 and smart contracts. And finally, we have Max from Solon Finance coming in, and he's just going to tell you about his experience working in the space and the challenges he faces. So yeah, tech at NEU Blockchain. So the problem that we see with this entire space is that if you don't already know someone in it who's really passionate about what they're trying to do, it's a bit difficult trying to get in. So what we're trying to do is have many developers come in, talk to you guys, just a bit of speaker events like we are doing right now, and give a chance for you guys to network with them, to talk to them, and maybe even find a job or anything. Finally, for those who don't know what smart contracts is or haven't really developed anything in the space, I am going to be hosting a couple of workshops in the space just to tell you about what NFTs are, DAOs, ERC20 tokens, and all of those sorts. And finally, if you guys are looking for hackathon partners or want other people to, collaborate on even on Gitcoin bounties, I'll be sure to check that out as well. And finally, if anyone here is a web developer and can help me with the front end of our website, please do reach out to me. So yeah, if you really want to get involved, this link does work. I tried it out, it does. So just fill the tech interest form and keep an eye on the Discord, and especially the development channel, because I'll be posting updates, resources, and anything later. You can do it later. I'll open it up. And yeah, these are just some of the startups here at NEU. So as I already said, Max is here, and there are a bunch of startups. There's Veridian Exchange, who are trying to build an exchange for, I think, baseball cards, or I don't know what it is, but it's really good. I'm not really.
You're doing what you're doing. NFTs backed by physical assets.
Yeah, NFTs backed by physical assets, exactly. So yeah, let's just talk about what Web3 is. So before actually what Web3 is, it's really important to understand how the web came along, because many of the deficiencies that we see with the Web 1, Web 2, and the internet were all addressed in Web 3. So this is how the internet started. You just had one network, which is the ARPANET, mainly used for just academic and military purposes, and just some scientists trying to exchange information with each other and feed that scientific curiosity that they had. But along the same time, many businesses started to understand what the web could do. They built many side chains, networks, and started to combine it all together. Some networks survived and some didn't. And that is what the internet was. And then came this guy. He made 3 very important discoveries. The first thing was the HTTP, the HTML, and the web browser. With this, we solved a major problem that the internet was now organized. You can move from one page to another page. And many of the startups at the time were also closely resembling that. If you guys know Elon Musk's first startup, Zip Pages or Yellow Pages, was a lot like this. Are we still on?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
It looks like it.
So yeah, the internet was largely read-only. That is, information only flowing in one side. The user could not give information back to them and could not have any services that are tailored to them. And that led to the information economy. And this is just a diagram showing that. But the 2 major problems we saw was state and the transfer of state. If at all anybody ever talks about blockchain, this is a really big point that is missed. There is now state, that is, each website or service can know who the user is, and it's public. And at the same time, there's a transfer of state, meaning what one website knows about you, he can share that very easily to another website. So the Web 2 did solve that issue, but in a very centralized order, as I say again. Yeah, so these were some of the companies that came up, Facebook, Google, and we really have a lot to thank to them, because without them, we could not have had the Web3 that we do today, or at least will have as we move forward. And the problem of state and transfer of state was solved with the help of cookies. It's that annoying little pop-up that shows on every web page that you go to, asking you to accept. That solved major of the internet's issues. Yeah, so this is the web as we know today. It's read-write interactive, meaning that information is flowing both ways. Each website or application knows who you are, what you are, and where you're from. And that's thanks to cookies and other improvements that we made moving forward. And yeah, this is finally just a diagram to show. Most of your data is stored on a centralized server, right? They just know how to identify you, who you are, and where you're from, but they don't know exactly what they know about you without you telling them that. And that's what we solved with Web3. So yeah, they changed the monetization models. They were now finally incentivized to make sure everybody had the internet. Even though they knew that they could then extract information from them and use them, they still made a deal that was good for both parties. The infrastructure had to be really, really good. And that is, if 3 billion users are using this, it meant that it had to be something else that we had never seen before. That led to innovation and the talent. Many people who work in the Web3 space have already worked for either Google, Amazon, or Facebook. Without the skills that they acquired there, they can't really do it for Web3. But Web2 wasn't really that good, mainly being centralization. These are the top 5 companies who control a quarter of the market share. Meaning if any day these were to go down, many people would not only lose their businesses, their money, but on some cases, even their lives. And with this, the second problem was the way that they interact with us changed over that time. Facebook wanted people to come on and just use their platform for the social good. But with time, they started extracting users for their information and selling them to other businesses. And if you see what Microsoft did with many competitors that they had in the same space, whether it be GitHub or Mozilla, they cooperated. They made sure that the development was done, but with time, they simply started competing with them. So this relationship had to change. It had to be more cooperative, more open. And yeah, if all information is in one space, that means it can be censored. And the governments have started to do that anyway. Governments in India, China, and any developing country are all using this massive storehouse of information with Google or Twitter to make sure that the political views of the other party don't get viewed. This is also something in America as well, like with Verizon blocking abortion group messages. And security and data breaches. Everybody knows what Facebook did in 2018 and what's been happening with Fortnite, Epic Games, and even the CIA. All of this is only because corporations not just control the way that you see things, but also have the rights and access to the code for it. But then with Web3, we started changing that. And Web3 is exactly how we do it. First thing is Web3 is an internet that will be owned by its builders and users, that is the developers and the people who are using this application, and it's orchestrated by tokens. I'll be breaking this statement down into like multiple pieces. And the only reason all of this is enabled is with the blockchain. Not only are you interacting with some aspects of Web 2, but at the same time, you're also interacting with something that is public, that is the blockchain. And because of the key features of the blockchain being that it's trustless, that you and I don't need to trust each other to be able to do some work. It's permissionless. That means anybody can just get into the space without asking anybody for permission. That is, a person in Africa can have a business set up without actually, like being a registered business in America. Second, decentralization, that is all eggs aren't in one basket anymore. And finally, with verifiable. That is, if I say I've done something, even if it's 10 years in the future, in the past, you can go in and check that because the blockchain is public to everyone. So yeah, how does Web3 do all of this? And the biggest part is that money, rather than being a feature of the internet, that is, you just go around and swipe your card somewhere, money is built in. Bitcoin did that very well with, being able to exchange Bitcoins with each other with what it's called the UTXO model. And Ethereum did that with the accounts model, but it added some layer of functionality on top of it. So anytime anyone is doing anything on the internet, money is always involved. which makes it very difficult for attacks like security breaches because it costs a lot of money. And at the same time, it makes sure that people are doing things for not just their own good, but for the good of the entire public in general. And because of Ethereum, because its ability to have applications running on top of it, we had dApps. So dApps are a special concept that is a decentralized application. That is an application that just doesn't run in one particular server like Google, Amazon, or whatever it is. It's distributed. It's there on multiple computers on a public ledger that anybody can just come and see. And the people who are building these dApps are now making sure that they are also decentralized with the help of DAOs. This is kind of like the future of how a corporation will be structured, where the people who are actually building the application, building the website, they will be able to vote. Users will be able to vote. And that's very important because we finally have a say in how things move forward. Like if we don't like how the way Facebook uses our data, then we can simply have a vote on it. And yeah, this is how the internet will be owned by its users and its builders. And finally, being self-sovereign identity, that is, you have control over your data, who has access to it, what they do with it, how they move forward with it. And yeah, this is just an example of that. If the government gives you a digital identity in terms of your SSN or whatever, you control it, you say who has access to it. And therefore it becomes very difficult to attack anybody because, well, you can't attack each and every person out there because it's not stored in one particular area. And actually we did do a research paper on this. Yusuf led that, and we have an 87-page digital identity paper that we did last semester. So if you guys want to check that out, it's really nice. And finally, at the bottom, or I can say as big as the web browser was, there's something called as a wallet. That is this little fox icon over here, and it's called a wallet provider. Everything that you will do to interact with Web3 will be through the means of this. And this is kind of like a window to the entire world of Web3. And yeah, this is like the stack of Web3. These are so many different applications that all work together. An important idea in this is something called as composability. That is, you only solve one problem once. Not many people solving the same problem again and again and again. You make it open, you make the code open, it's all available to you, and everybody just comes in, adds their own flavor on top of it, and make sure other people can then use it. At the bottom, you have the protocol layers that are the networks, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, Cardano, and bridges that are able to work between them. Then on top, you have people who are solving simple problems like decentralized finance, digital identity, IPFS. And on the last two layers, you have the use cases that are simple applications that are built on top. If you've ever used Uniswap or Mirror or OpenSea just to buy an NFT, this comes here. And finally, for the user, you would have their wallets, the aggregators, just like simple search engines, and even aspects of Web2 that you will still use to communicate. And yeah, these are just some of the applications that are there in Web2 and are now being built on Web3. Either for data storage, web hosting, data analytics, everything that you see out there is now being built in Web3. And there is so much development left. If you ever look at Ethereum, that is the biggest protocol out there, and their roadmap, they have 5 distinct phases, each going to take around 2 to 3 years just to build. So there's a lot of time and a lot of space for development and people to come in and work for it. And yeah, that brings us to an end of what Web3 is. But Web3 would be incomplete without, as I said, applications that are running on them. And these applications run on them with the help of smart contracts. So smart contracts is actually a very old idea. If you guys ever heard about the concept of cypherpunks, so basically there were these group of individuals who would all talk about how they wanted money to change. And these people were all involved with the initial launch and the use of Bitcoin. And Nick Szabó was one of the biggest researchers in this field. He came up with a concept, which basically meant a smart contract is computer code acting like a legal contract, but it executes autonomously. So it became computer code that executed on the blockchain. And the best example I can give you for this is like a vending machine. You put in some money, you make a selection, and you get an output back. As simple as that. However, with time, as more development in the space happened, people started realizing that with smart contracts, you could do absolutely everything. So they weren't really legal contracts anymore, but used for many different purposes, like digital identity and many more. And as I said, they are meant to be composable. They are meant to be open with the help of ERC standards. If you've heard of any tokens, they are all of the same standard. And if you know what Uniswap is and how it's been forked and forked again and again to form SushiSwap, PancakeSwap, and there are many companies that are just built and whose their entire business is just to fork Uniswap. That's it. And now they are finally legally binding. That is the whole argument that code is law. If vetted and analyzed enough, the Belarus government will start actually accepting them as legal contracts. And yeah, so where do these smart contracts get built? Where do you run this code? Now there are many platforms, and some people like some platforms more than others. This is the whole Ethereum versus Solana debate or Ethereum versus the Avalanche debate. But an important thing to remember in all of this that according to me, Ethereum is still going to win. And it's the reason is because of their computer language. That is, they've built a language that is Turing complete, which means that you can run absolutely anything on it. And not just that, it's very good for beginners. Like there are so many resources on it that even if you just try to get into the space, it would be impossible for you to do that. So there's EVM, right? Which currently supports Solidity, which is a lot like most programming languages you've seen before, Java, Go, JavaScript, whatever. There's Viper, which is very Pythonic, that is written just like the Python language would be. And nowadays, there's also Fay. So if anybody who's a developer in Rust or is actually doing Solana along with it, they can just do Fay instead. All of which makes it better for you guys to learn Ethereum and how to write code on it because it has a scope for expansion. You can move away from one particular network to another. And finally, this is my last point, is that smart contracts are severely limited. And this is not something that is there by choice. Sorry, it is actually by choice. Yeah, they cannot call APIs. That is, if you've ever done any kind of backend coding before, you've usually relied a lot on other APIs for your services, either for weather data or whatever it is. And smart contracts can't do that. The reason being that the consensus mechanism at the heart of the blockchain would be impossible or nearly impossible with APIs. And for those reasons, you have oracles. That is, if you've heard about Chainlink before. And all of these things I would like to cover in my workshop. So if you guys do, please attend that. And another thing would be size. You can't really have a large code base like in one particular contract because then the transaction runs out of gas. And there are many practical problems with that. But there are something called as diamond patterns for you that will help us write code for it. And finally, it's not a database. That is, you can't store everything within the smart contract. All of users' information has to be stored with the user and not on the blockchain. And that means the smart contract is not a backend. And with that, my part is over. So we're going to be heading over with Max and Ivan, who are going to be asking him questions.
So now we're going to be having the Q&A with Solon Finance.
Hello, how's it going?
This is Max. And I set up a little intro paragraph for you.
Oh, sweet.
So, Max, I think your last name's Lyman?
Lyman.
Lyman? Okay, Max is a fourth-year electrical engineering and computer science student here at Northeastern, currently working on Solon Finance. Solon Finance is a decentralized automated market maker protocol soon to be deployed on the Ethereum network. It has a variety of features and products for the users, including a decentralized exchange, liquidity pool staking, an NFT marketplace with fractional and rentable NFTs, and a soon-to-be hardware wallet geared towards lowering the entry barrier to crypto and blockchain. The Solon protocol is aiming to launch in July after undergoing an official audit conducted by security firm Trail of Bits. So please welcome Max.
Just so you know, I've been working in this industry since 2016. I started by I'm not even a software person, believe it or not, but a key thing is actually understanding how everything works. It'll really get you far. And believe it or not, the hardest part about coding smart contracts is not learning Solidity, but understanding how to organize and implement structures. It's a completely different form of thought in the Web3 industry. When you see platforms like Uniswap, a decentralized exchange, you got to ask yourself, if someone were to ask you right now to build a decentralized exchange, how would you build a decentralized exchange? For it to be decentralized, right? We have our centralized exchanges like Coinbase, Binance, New York Stock Exchange. They all work on what's known as the order book model. So if you want to sell your position, that means someone else somewhere else in the world has to buy that position. Trades seem to go through instantly because there's enough volume. But we've seen certain market conditions like 2008, which they were not able to go through instantly. And at the end of the day, Coinbase holds all of your money on your behalf. You don't actually hold your money. They're like a bank. So at the end of the day, we have billions of people around the world who are used to corruption and crazy amounts of inflation. And you see countries like Nigeria is an amazing example. 200 million people live in Nigeria. They've experienced more than 90% inflation since 2008. None of us here could imagine losing 90% of the value of our wealth in a few years, but they've experienced more than 90% inflation since 2008. Their government publicly said a snake ate $2 billion in taxpayer money. So I'm sure you can understand the people of Nigeria are fed up with their country. So believe it or not, even though the average GDP per capita is only around $2,000, Nigeria has the second highest volume in trading cryptocurrency in the world. So you see countries like this all over the world. At the end of the day, they care about decentralization. The reason why is Nigeria wanted to, they could call up the CEO of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong, and say, hey, Coinbase can't operate in Nigeria any longer, freeze everyone's accounts. And this actually happened during SARS, which was a protest over a year ago, and it sparked a whole decentralization movement. And the Nigerian government froze everyone's bank accounts who were protesting. So all those people moved their money to cryptocurrency. And at the end of the day, if all your funds are frozen, how are you going to feed your family, right? So believe it or not, the majority of the world values decentralization because they can't trust their governments. They're sick of trusting centralized powers and small groups of individuals. So that's where things like Ethereum are extremely important. And when you compare Ethereum to all these other blockchains like Solana, Avalanche, etc., the important thing to keep in mind, Cardano is actually a pretty good one, but the thing that really stands out for Ethereum is not how nice it is for nerds on the coding side, but actually how decentralized it is. The problem with Solana is they control 45% of their validator nodes in-house. What's a node? Essentially, your node is a list of every single transaction that has ever happened on the blockchain. So if you were a node and I were a node, let's say there was only 2, right? And I owed you 50 Ethereum. I sent you 50 Ethereum. You say you received 50 Ethereum. But as a node, I could say instead, he sent me 50 Ethereum. He's going to say that's incorrect. I sent him 50 Ethereum. But if there's only 2, which one's right and which one's wrong? How do you know? If you're an outsider and there's only 2, one saying one thing, the other saying another thing, you don't know which one's right and which one's wrong. It's a little different when, let's say, there's 100. And my node says you sent me 50, but every other one says I sent you 50. So the 99 others say I'm full of shit, I'm lying, and they kick me out. And that's how these decentralization consensus mechanisms work. So in order to be a validator on Ethereum's network, I need to stake 32 Ethereum, which is about $300,000 I need to put up in collateral. So basically, if I try to do anything malicious, like screw this guy right here, everyone will say, I'm full of shit, and I lose my 32 Ethereum. I lose $300,000 instantly for trying to do anything malicious. That's the disincentive for trying to do anything malicious on the consensus layer. So that's why Ethereum is really important because of its layer of level of decentralization. Ethereum has hundreds of thousands of nodes. Aside from Bitcoin, the second largest, well, I guess third largest decentralized consensus mechanism is only a few thousand nodes. So I'm sure you can appreciate the level of decentralization difference there. And the problem is going back to Solana, right? They control 45% of their nodes in-house. So let's say they called up a few people, gained an additional 6%. That means they have 51%. What can they do with that? They can empty out every single person's wallet on their blockchain, steal all your money and run away. Obviously, we all think they're never going to do that. I'm sure we want to believe that they would never do that. But the problem is Nigeria, the government could call up the CEO of Solana, a blockchain that's supposed to be decentralized, and say, hey, freeze every transaction on the blockchain. At the end of the day, you don't want to have anyone else have control over your money. So that's why I'm really bullish on Ethereum. At the end of the day, fees on Ethereum are starting to get kind of crazy. And what you guys have to always ask yourself is, if fees are extremely cheap, what is the trade-off? How come it costs me nothing per transaction? Because at the end of the day, these validators have to get paid. These miners have to get paid. People who validate consensus mechanisms have to get paid. Otherwise, it can't be decentralized. It can't be distributed. This is one of the reasons why Ethereum is so decentralized. And at the end of the day, you can't buy decentralization. So it's an important fundamental metric. So going back to Ethereum's gas fees, the reason they're so high is because Ethereum is so decentralized. You see all these proof of stake blockchains. Ethereum will be proof of stakes in the next few months. Like Solana, right? They have microcent fees, but in exchange for having microcent fees, what's the trade-off? It's centralization. It's much more centralized. If someone was doing a 51% tag, everyone who was transacting at that point in time would lose all of their money. And that's a lot easier on a network like Solana, where there's a lot less nodes and it's a lot easier to become a node and a validator. So always ask yourself, what's the trade-off and the difference in fees? So going back to Ethereum, obviously the normal person in the world can't afford to pay $10, $15 per transaction and then over $100 per NFT transaction. So what's the solution? We see layer 2s that are basically built off Ethereum's blockchain. So they use Ethereum's level of decentralization, but they have their own off-chain consensus mechanisms. Now you see layer 2s like Polygon. Polygon is a great layer 2, but they have a problem where they are fairly centralized. Even though fundamentally they're backed by Ethereum's level of decentralization, their individual consensus mechanism to scale it, to make it so the fees are basically negligible, is fairly centralized. So what everyone in the blockchain world right now is really excited about are these things known as ZK rollup platforms. And ZK rollup platforms use validation proofs. So basically, they can only accept inputs that are true. So it's just about as secure as Ethereum mainnet layer 1, but it's 175 times as scalable. What does that mean for you? Let's say your average fee on Ethereum mainnet is $175. On an EVM compatible ZK rollup platform, it's $1. ZK rollup platforms are already out, and Polygon has been buying them up because they know it's going to kill them as a better layer 2. They just bought the Mirror protocol for $400 million. What are we waiting for? We're waiting for an EVM compatible ZK rollup platform, which they're in development. They'll be here soon. What does that mean? If something's EVM, let's say you're Uniswap, right? You deployed your entire ecosystem on Ethereum mainnet. And of course, you would want your ecosystem to also be on this layer 2 platform to give more accessibility to everyone and be fairly decentralized. By the way, that's why you don't see Uniswap on platforms like Solana, because it doesn't make their requirements for level of decentralization. But what they're waiting for is an EVM compatible ZK rollup platform. Why? What does EVM compatible do for developers? You can literally just copy and paste your code. That's it. You just copy and paste it. You don't have to change anything. It's nice, user-friendly. And that's going to be the real push to migrating platforms to a ZK rollup platform when one is finally EVM compatible. But the number one perspective one is one known as ZK Sync. Number 2 is the Mirror protocol, which Polygon bought. Number 3 is Hermes, which Polygon also bought. But I like Polygon because they're smart enough to know to buy their competitors. They know that that form of layer 2 is going to kill their current consensus mechanism because it's more decentralized and scalable enough where people are willing to pay a $1 fee on an NFT transaction to have that level of security, especially when you're trading NFTs like Bored Apes that are worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? You should be willing to pay a little bit of extra money for security. But that's my general intro on the blockchain everything. But as far as smart contracts go, you don't need to be a developer to work in this space. I've worked with Gucci, I've worked with EA Sports, I've worked with Super Plastics, Deadheads, the Fishy Fam, most recently.
Do you want to go into that for the people that don't know about that? Because I feel like that's
Which
pretty-
one?
Fishy Fam.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like that's pretty insightful on the importance of smart contract security.
Yes,
Like,
yes, this is a great point.
Yeah.
So the Fishy Fam was a project that actually a close friend of mine, he was a team member of. And this guy is actually a member of my project, and that's how I knew him. And he was working on this NFT project. And he talked to me a few months ago, and he was just asking questions about tokenomics because they're interested in incorporating them into their project. And I gave him some advice. He was my friend. And then he's like, hey, we're launching this project, blah, blah, blah. Here's the art. I'm like, this looks amazing. And he's like, hey, we have this smart contract developer. He's all right. I'm like, all right. And he's just creating a minting contract, which if you guys don't know, people get paid like $10,000 to $100,000 to create a minting contract. And believe it or not, it's mainly because of lack of educational awareness. A minting contract is actually an open source contract. You can find it on Open Zeppelin. It's 100% free, and you don't actually have to change anything. But usually people will pay more to get better quality developers that can optimize gas, because the problem with Open Zeppelin's open source minting contract, their ERC 721 contract, is they put in there every single function they could possibly think of. What's wrong with that is gas, your fee that you pay, is actually a denomination of storage. So that's why NFTs are more expensive to transact than cryptocurrencies, because it's more storage on Ethereum's blockchain. So the more functions you have in your smart contract, the more it's not only going to cost to deploy to the Ethereum mainnet, the blockchain, but it's also going to cost more for users who, let's say, are your customers and want to mint one of your NFTs. They don't want to have to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars in gas, especially when everyone's trying to get the same NFT. Gas prices spike. It's based on supply and demand, after all. So what you can do is you can start cutting out these functions. So there are certain functions like the enumerable function and other ones that you don't need whatsoever. So you can literally go to Open Zeppelin's open source contract, start cutting out a bunch of these random functions. Keep in mind, if there may be functions you may want to use in the future, it's going to depend on that project individually and what they may want to use down the road. But there's certain functions that allow for like less gas price in bundling NFTs, so you can send multiple at the same time, which are great. But there are other functions that you may have absolutely no need for. So cut out as many as you can and you'll save everyone money. Optimize gas, and if you cut enough down, you can make it so it's even $30 to mint an NFT, which on Ethereum mainnet, which is pretty cheap. I kind of lost my train of thought from where I started. Oh yeah, Fishy Fan. Thank you. So anyway, this is a friend of mine. He's like, hey, after this developer's done, we have an agreement with them. He's going to get a % of sales to create our minting contract. After that, we don't really like him, so we'd really appreciate it if you guys could come in and give us some advice and create our future contracts. So I was like, okay, he's a friend of mine. I like him. And he showed me the art. It was dope as fuck. I was like, okay, I know this project's going to sell out. So I was like, all right, give me a bunch of your NFTs and send them. I don't accept payment for anything. I'm like an idealistic communist. So every time I make money, it actually goes to my DAO, which is owned by all my my project investors, right? So basically, I said send a bunch of NFTs to my DAO, and do some cross promo for us, because the biggest thing for my project is we did everything grassroots. We haven't paid for anything except for our audit, which was $320,000. But we haven't paid for anything other than the audit. So we're like, we love organic promo. The best way I've been doing that so far has been just getting up in Twitter spaces, talking to people, talking to developers. Build your social brand. That's the best advice I could ever give to anyone, because no matter where you go, you're never going to lose that. It's the first thing employers are going to look at in the Web3 space. Anyway, back to Fishy Fam. So they had a disaster with their minting contract. Basically, what happened is, so this guy wanted to make it so only addresses that were whitelisted could mint from the contract. So if your address is whitelisted, what that means is basically you can feed into a smart contract. So only these addresses can interact with a specific function in your contract. In this case, it was the mint function. So they had 3,333 addresses that they fed in there, 3,400. But the problem was he wanted to make it so each address could only mint a maximum of 3 NFTs. And the way he did that was based on the balance of the wallet address. The reason why that's the problem is what the people found out very quickly while they're minting is if they transferred all those NFTs out, the 3 that they just minted to a different address, and then copied their signature from the prior transaction, they could just mint 3 more all over again because it was based on the balance of the wallet address, not the total they had that address had minted. That was the fundamental problem with this contract, and it allowed for a pretty bad exploit that ended up costing them a few $1 million. So after that happened, they were like, yeah, we need you guys in here right away. So we're taking care of a few future contracts for them, and it's anything in this space, like especially when you're creating this space, you want to make sure deals always work out in everyone's favor. The best thing you can do is equity deals because it doesn't cost them anything up front, and it's a win-win for everyone, right? So basically the way it worked for me is I was creating some basic contracts for them, a new minting contract for their like mutants, cryptocurrency, and then some like basic tokenomics. And these were contracts I had already created for myself for my own protocol. So it takes me no work, maybe less than a day, probably worth of work. In exchange, our DAO got paid the equivalent of probably like $50,000, and we get their Twitter account has 67,000 followers. They're gonna tweet about us, do like a little giveaway. It'll get us a lot of exposure. So it's a win-win, right? Because if they wanted to hire a developer of that quality, they would have to pay a decent amount of money. But for us, sure, we not only get paid, but it's work we already had to do for ourselves, right? So it win-win. And what you'll see a lot in the development space is a lot of contracts just get circled around and passed around. So a lot of minting contracts with fundamental flaws. You see those flaws occur over and over again because those contracts get passed around. But yeah, so that's what I did with the Fishy Fam. And then my project Solon is at the end of September, we started doing our own NFTs. And the reason why is I don't hate rich people, but I hate VCs, venture capitalists. So a problem in the Web3 industry is famous tweet from Jack Dorsey, apparently controversial, is the Web3 space is still owned by VCs. Everyone got salty about that because apparently the Web3 space is supposed to be this great equalizer. Everyone has a chance to make an equal opportunity and make all this wealth. But the reality of it is, in its current stance, 80% of the industry is still owned by 80-year-old white men. So how do you change that? And the answer for me was, at the end of the day, it's all up to the creator. So all these creators decided how much of the supply of their cryptocurrency, Uniswap is a great example, their team decided how much of the supply of the cryptocurrency goes to us, the team. They decided 18%. How much supply of the cryptocurrency goes to venture capitalists so we can raise money to do whatever we want. And they get to buy it at 10 cents on the dollar. How much supply goes to the public and they have to pay 10 times that price. These VCs make an instant 10x for fronting them the money. And fundamentally, I believe that this space is about decentralization. I believe it's about the individual and how we function as a whole. So instead of getting my money from VCs, I raised the money I needed through an NFT sale. So I sold NFTs on a linearly increasing price function. And the reason why I did that is because we didn't want VCs to come in and just buy all of our NFTs because it'd be the same problem all over again. Or rich people to just swallow up the supply. We want everyone to have an equal opportunity. So the first NFT you bought was 0.06 Ethereum. The second one you bought was 0.07. The third 0.08, and it keeps increasing linearly. So you would have to pay more for each additional NFT you bought. So it disincentivized you from purchasing more than one. Obviously, the people who could afford to purchase more than one and understood the value in our protocol did. And the people who understood the value in our protocol still, but maybe weren't able to afford it, purchased one. The bonus of that is all that extra money introduced in fees and that linear increase gets circulated back to everyone. It goes to the ecosystem as a whole. Everyone is purchasing an equal amount of equity per increment. And you have to pay a premium if you want more equity and therefore more voting power. So what does my protocol do? Basically, we're trying to compete with with Uniswap, Balancer, Bancor, and OpenSea, and looks rare, I guess now. But we're similar to Balancer V3 combined with Uniswap V2. I don't want to get too technical, but basically Uniswap's in Uniswap's marketplace, if you want to provide liquidity, you can only do it with two assets and a 50-50 pairing. And they came up with this thing known as concentrated liquidity about 6 months ago, which was a huge innovation in the space. Balancer came up with this thing known as an nth dimensional value function. And that allows you to provide liquidity for more than two assets in a single liquidity pool, actually up to 32 in their ecosystem. So we wanted to create a way where you could have concentrated liquidity and an nth dimensional value function at the same time. So we created a new equation for that. And that's the core part of our automated market maker. And we've created a bunch of other stuff, but at the end of the day, in normal terms, we've created an ecosystem that allows for anyone in the world to create their own fund and also to enter anyone else's fund. So let's say you make millions and millions of dollars a year investing in NFTs and cryptocurrencies. If I was a random person who knew absolutely nothing about crypto, didn't have the time to learn, didn't have the time to research, and wanted to make the same rate of return as this guy, I could put my money in his pool. You wouldn't have to do any extra work. You wouldn't have to do anything different. You just have to set up the pool. So what's in it for you? You actually get a percent of their trading fees. So Uniswap actually has a fee for every trade at 0.1, 0.3, or 1%. Most of that goes to liquidity provider. Some of it goes to their DAO. You get fees. So not only are you making money off your own capital, like you normally would while providing liquidity, but you're also making money off of every other user who wants to get the same rate of return as you. So what's in it for the user? They get the same rate of return as you. What's in it for you? You make more money than you ever could have before. So then you move aside from that, our marketplace actually has no fees. And the reason why we can do that is, one, we're trying to kill OpenSea and Looks Rare because they are purely marketplaces, purely NFT marketplaces, and they need fees. That's their source of revenue. We don't, because we actually generated all of our fees in our automated market maker. Every time someone swaps one cryptocurrency for another, we collect a fee, just like people normally would on Uniswap. Let's say if they want to trade ETH for WETH to place a bid on an NFT on OpenSea. So that's how we're gonna hopefully kill OpenSea and Looks Rare. But in addition to that, we've created a new Ethereum protocol standard for the world's first rentable and mortgageable NFTs. And they work without any collateral. And this is done through something that is normally seen as extremely dangerous and taboo in the smart contract industry, and it's known as reentrancy. And what is reentrancy? Reentrancy essentially allows you to interact with multiple functions in a single transaction, multiple functions at the same time in one transaction. Famous hack is, if you guys know about Ethereum Classic and this book called Out of the Ether, is the Ethereum DAO hack actually happened because of reentrancy, where a guy was able to exploit Ethereum's DAO and start depleting their treasury. So basically a bunch of other good guys in the Ethereum network saw what was going on, and they did the attack on the DAO too, took all the remaining money, held it, and gave it back. So this is why Ethereum forked to create Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, because they wanted to say F you to the hacker and leave. And basically in their fork, they just cut out his wallet address. So it said he had nothing, but he obviously still had Ethereum Classic. So all the money he made ended up being an Ethereum Classic, not Ethereum, still a lot of money. But yeah, that's the story. So anyway, we use reentrancy to make it so users couldn't possibly sell someone else's NFT if they were renting it. Basically, it allows you to have that NFT in your wallet inside the same transaction. So you can do things like, let's say you need to claim a code or need to get into some metaverse land, or it gives you access to an in-person event, whatever it is, whatever the benefits or the bonuses of that NFT may be, airdrops, minting other NFTs, you name it. You can use an NFT for whatever you want. Well, now you can rent that out to other people completely trustlessly, and it's impossible for them to steal your NFT or to sell it to someone else. And the cool thing is, let's say you rent out an NFT for 24 hours. Let's say you're done with it after 12. You can rent it out to someone else for the remaining 12. Whatever wallet address it's in, it's automatically withdrawn and returned to the original owner. Then this gets like all sorts of cool and scalable. So like I said, I've done some work with EA. So I'll give you guys a great example. So EA Sports, let's say they could make the Madden video game an NFT. Why would they do that? Well, one, it makes it so only one person can play it at a time. No one can pirate it. And at the same time, let's say you got sick of your game, you went to GameStop, they gave you $5 for it. EA would get none of that money. Now, for the first time in history, they can realize an entirely new revenue source where they can collect secondary fees automatically on the blockchain. So they get 50% of that sale, 20%, 5%, whatever they want, of every sale, every secondary sale for the rest of time. And where does my protocol come in? So let's say you bought this Madden NFT for $60. You're not going to be home for 3 months, so you can't even play it. Now you can rent it out to someone else who doesn't want to pay $60 for their video game. Let's say they pay you $10 to rent it out for 3 months and play it. Boom, they get to play it for 3 months. They don't want to pay $60. They got to pay it, play it. And now you're making a passive income off your video game, which I'm sure your mom said, hey, the second you buy this, you're throwing your money out the window. Now you can not only make your return on investment on that game, but you can make even more money. You can make a passive income off something as simple as a video game. So you could even rent it out every single night in your sleep for 12 hours and start making a passive income. And that's just one example. But our ecosystem does a bunch of other stuff, but I'm not going to bore you guys. So if you have any questions. What's up, man?
Let's say we have an NFT, which is a bunch of different NFTs. Now you rent the NFT. Can I use it and sell the different NFTs which are inside of the NFT and rent like each individually to earn more?
So you're bundling an NFT inside of other NFTs.
Yeah, so bundling an NFT.
So that would be a wrapper. So that would be a different type of token. So the standard for an individual NFT is ERC 721. So basically the blockchain could tell right away that this isn't an individual NFT. So it just wouldn't let you do that in the first place.
But wouldn't that be a good use case to do it?
If you wanted to, you could bundle things, but there's no one has really, I don't know of any use cases for that, to be honest with you. I mean, usually what they do is they give you an NFT to let you claim other NFTs, or that NFT allows them to airdrop other NFTs to you.
So for example, in Avagochi, if you have a ghost, you can have like variables which are different NFTs, and then basically you have a NFT which owns different NFTs itself. Yep. So wouldn't it be a good idea to rent the whole app NFT, and then the person who has bought it, that person will send individuals like it's variable or it's food or it's hat or whatever.
So yeah, those things would actually come in the form of an airdrop. If you wanted to rent multiple NFTs, like let's say articles of clothing, you could do it all at the same time, packaged together, not wrapped together. So it wouldn't be bundled inside of another NFT, but they technically all be separate, but moved in the same transaction.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I had a personal question I want to ask you.
What's up?
Well, me personally, I'm a big fan of your protocol.
Sweet.
Cool. But you have your audit coming up and you got to get through that before launching. Do you have any concerns at all?
Oh yeah.
Because I know your impermanent loss equation, that's like your I don't know, it's pretty crazy if that works.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. That's actually really simple. I'll explain to you guys how it works. So so we've also created the first equation in history that allows users, liquidity providers, to have zero impermanent loss. Actually, it's a scale between 0 and 100. How do we do it? Nothing comes out of thin air. No money comes out of thin air. Something is always being taken from somewhere else. So what we're doing is we're actually allowing liquidity providers to transfer that amount of impermanent loss to the user. So if they want a known impermanent loss, they transfer all that impermanent loss to the user. How does the equation work? It actually calculates the potential maximum amount of impermanent loss per trade and transfers that to the user. So basically, your liquidity providers are usually a small group of individuals, and your traders are usually, let's say, basic ratio, let's say 10 to 10,000, right? 10 liquidity providers for every 10,000 swaps or trades. So the fee going to liquidity providers that they experience impermanent loss is a lot more dramatic than that same fee being distributed amongst 10,000 individuals. It's cents, right? So obviously the user's not really going to care. Sure, they may care, but there's going to be competition in our own marketplace, right? Because there are going to be liquidity providers that may have zero impermanent loss, or 100% impermanent loss, or 50%. And they're going to be competing against each other because anyone can provide liquidity for any cryptocurrency in the ecosystem. And at the end of the day, the user's going to trade with whatever liquidity provider is the cheapest.
So go back to my question.
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, what concerns do you have? I mean, it's a pretty aggressive protocol, but it'd be pretty awesome.
yeah, so thankfully, we're up to 11 employees right now. We recently added a project manager who's been working for 30 years in the space, not in the Web3 space, obviously, but in software. And we added someone to do our API, Graph API. The Graph is great, by the way, guys, if you're ever looking to any API work. And a new front-end developer. So we have daily meetings, stand-ups. We have like our own GitHub repo. We communicate with everyone there, all of our tasks, everything's public, but the key is really organization. At the end of the day, our deadline, the protocol is live on July 1st, but our deadline is May 9th. That's when the audit starts. So we paid Trail of Bits $320,000. Obviously, we don't want that to go to waste. So we have to deliver as much as we possibly can on that date, and they will audit as many of our contracts as they possibly can. But a really important thing for us is not only do we develop all these contracts in time, but we also test them on our end, because we want to develop our own unit tests. We want to develop all sorts of tests, because not only does it save us time and give us a better sense of the security of our contracts, but it saves Trail of Bits time, and we pay them by the hour. So we want to save them as much time as possible, because if they don't use all the time we've already paid for, then we get a credit that we can use later on, which is great. But at the end of the day, guys, audits aren't foolproof. You got to vet things as much as possible. And there are really only 3 accredited auditors in the space if you're doing like new experimental work, like developing new protocol standards. And those are Open Zeppelin, Consensus, and Trail of Bits. And the quickest you can get an audit from any 3 of those is 6 months, at least a 6-month waiting period. It took me forever to find this data, so I'm sure some people really appreciate it. But for a 1-person work month, it's $160,000 of auditing. For 2 people work month, it's 360 about, or 320 about, sorry. And that's pretty standard between Consensus, Open Zeppelin, and Trail of Bits. Some are slightly cheaper than others, some are more expensive. Open Zeppelin, if you want an audit from them, you have to wait until at least 2023 right now. Consensus, I was actually originally going to get my audit with Consensus, and we got some beef, but so they were going to schedule me in for July, and then all of a sudden, like they get back to me like a month later. I got my money in hand. They're like, "Oh, we're not scheduling anymore." So I was like, "Fuck you guys." I need a guarantee on when you're going to give me my audit. But Trail of Bits is great, and you know what? I prefer Trail of Bits at the end of the day anyway, because one, I got to meet with their CEO Dan. He's a great guy. And 2, they did the audit for Uniswap, all of Uniswap. They did the audit for Balancer. They did the audit for the MakerDAO, the largest protocols. And they also did Gemini smart contracts. They did some work for Coinbase. So they are the best for us specifically, because at the end of the day, our core product is an automated market maker.
I think that's a good time to wrap up, unless there's any like super short last minute questions. So make it short.
Any comments on DeFi 2.0?
DeFi 2.0. Oh, we're already in DeFi 2.0. Where have you been?
Olympus DAO. Any comments on Olympus DAO, the protocol, the idea?
So Olympus DAO is kind of cool. Thankfully, I never put too much. Of course, I put money into it to play around with it. But so the way the Olympus DAO and these DAOs work is they function on what's known as bonding mechanics. So basically, you can buy the Olympus coin, but you can buy it essentially 5 days earlier. So the way it works is everyone who wants to bond, they get a discount, let's say 20% on the value of Olympus currency. How does that not just shit their currency? Basically, you got to wait 5 days to get your money. So it could go up or down in those next 5 days. Anyway, they introduced this bonding mechanic, and basically they created a way to take the MakerDAO, style it, and allow people to loan out their money on their protocol in exchange to get their Olympus token. And they take their loaned out capital and actually reinvest it. So they're kind of like a DAO, like an individual fund, and also a DAO. It's pretty cool if you look into it. But there are 3 protocols I generally suggest everyone read the white paper up to like see the big innovators in the space. And it's Uniswap, the MakerDAO. Uniswap, the MakerDAO, and the Olympus protocol. Most recently, Olympus. Just because they are the ultimate extremes in the space. There's nothing like those three uniquely. They're each in their own field, and they were each the biggest innovators and pioneers in their respective fields. Uniswap with the decentralized exchange, the automated market maker, the MakerDAO with the decentralized stablecoin, and the Olympus protocol with bonding. But those are really it for big innovators in the DeFi space as of right now. Everything else is more or less a copycat, or they innovate on one like really cool individual section of that overarching group.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but that was a fun conversation. Thank you, Max, for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And yeah, I guess give it. We'll be hanging out here a bit longer. If you guys want to come up, ask questions, feel free. But thanks for coming.